As Eddie Rodriguez said, as you guys were transitioning, we had so many things happen this summer that really elevated our concern around issues of racial justice. And then, of course, more recently, we've seen so many things happening in our country in the last couple of weeks that have also escalated those concerns. Our student advisory put together this entire 2 days, and one of the topics they wanted to address was racial justice. Initially, we thought we were going to be able to meet in person. So Akeem Brown, who is the local educator here and is in the process of establishing a new school that focuses on issues of racial justice, was going to do an in-person workshop. But of course, in this environment, that's very difficult. So we decided rather than to do that, we would just have an open discussion with y'all today. So Mr. Brown is going to lead that. He's going to facilitate that discussion and maybe talk a little bit about his work. And we're going to hear from 4 of our students from our student advisory who identified this topic as something they were passionate about. So we have Kaya Vaught. Kaya, you can feel free to unmute. We have from Cass Lead High School. We have Gabby Silva, I believe from Cass Med High School, and it looks like she's in person today at school. We have Alex Bazan from Cass Tech, who you heard from earlier today, and Letza Martinez, who is also from Cass Med High School. So why don't the 4 of you unmute, and Mr. Brown can kick us off. And folks, if you want, just like you did in the previous session, if you have questions you want the panel to address, you can go ahead and start putting them in the chat, and we'll take them through the course of this conversation.
Sounds great. Well, first of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really excited to be here with each and every one of your bright minds, because I truly believe that as we talk about racial justice and we talk about forging into the future, I believe that it's going to be each and every one of you that will be at the table leading those discussions. I wanted to just share just briefly who I am, and then also tell you why this discussion is so important to me, and then we'll hear from you all. I want to hear more from you than me talking, and that's why I'm moderating. But more or less, my name is Akeem Brown. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I moved here to San Antonio as quick as I possibly can. That's what I like to say. But 7 years ago, so I've been here 7 years. This is now home. San Antonio has become home to me. And my passion is really around education and racial justice and seeing young people forge the opportunities that I had. And that's the opportunity of leadership, the opportunity to exercise that skill of agency. So speaking up for yourself and speaking out against things that you know are wrong, right? For and more importantly, to your community. And so with all of that said, I'm really excited to hear from each and every one of you today as we begin to talk about this in this conversation. And I want to kick it off by bringing the conversation right to the fold to our panelists by asking you, and Gabriella, I'll throw this first question to you. I'm gonna call out if that's okay. When you hear the words racial justice, right? Because those are buzzwords. Everyone's saying them now, right? Everyone's calling it out, whether it's a t-shirt, a post on Facebook, you name it. Everyone's asking for it or talking about it. But tell me, what does those words mean to you? So Gabby, when you hear those words, what do they mean to you?
So when I hear the words racial justice, I think about kind of the barriers of pride and hate that we've kind of built over the years as humans. And I think of breaking those down and kind of becoming one instead of categorizing ourselves into these categories, and just coming united and holding everyone to the same standards, and just all being the same, but still having our individuality.
I totally agree with you around the individuality piece. I mean, everything you said, but I want to resonate with the individuality piece because I think that's important, right? When you really understand who you are and you respect and authorize that thought, right? So that's that confidence in who you are. That's your culture, your language, everything that makes that up. You generally are a little bit more bold in your thoughts, right? You rest in confidence, but you can become more respectful of others' thoughts, right? Because at that same frame, you know what it means to be yourself. And you don't want anyone else to be you. You want to be yourself. You want to encourage other people to be themselves as well, right? And so for me, I think I agree 100% when you brought up the individuality piece around racial justice. How do I fit into that? And that's extremely important. I want to turn it over to Kaya. Kaya, tell me, when you hear racial justice, what are your thoughts?
Well, racial justice, if any, hasn't happened in a long time. And I think that the ideal of racial justice is not arresting someone on the side of the road just for being there, not looking at someone and judging them by the way they look and their past history. You don't do that. I think racial justice is being able to accept that they're just people, not of any color.
Yeah, that touches me, Kaya, because one, although I shared that Ms. Russell shared that I'm getting ready to open up a school, Essence Preparatory Charter School, hopefully on the east side of San Antonio in 2022. Um, I am also giving birth to one great, idea, but I'm getting ready to have a baby boy in February, right? And I'm really excited. Yep, really excited to have a baby boy. But it's evident, it's obvious. Let's see it, right? I'm a Black man, so my son is going to be a young Black boy, and I'm very, very concerned around what it will be like for him, right? Walking to school, getting home, walking home from school, participating in certain activities, going to certain schools. And so, what do we do as members of this community to play a role to change that, not only for my son, but for all of you? What do we do? And with that question, I'm gonna turn it over to Alex. Alex, what do we do about this? How do we impact change to fix this? As Kaya said, so people are not judged by just the way they look. And thank you, either Jaime or Jamie, thank you so much.
Okay, I think the best thing at the moment we could do to kind of change things would to be inform people. A lot of the issues are spurred from people not knowing what they're talking about, not knowing what they're seeing, not knowing what they're considered to be bystanders by. So, learning to inform people and helping people understand another would kind of eliminate the issues. Because when people don't understand each other, they have a conflict, it's just going to lead down to more issues. Because when they don't know what the other person's coming from, what side they're coming from, that causes more issues because then they can't see eye to eye, and trying to find a solution when you can't see eye to eye is 10 times difficult.
Yeah, and that's, Alex, I couldn't agree with you even more, right? I think one, it's the ability to have a conversation, right? I stress that all the time. That's that ability to understand and respect each other. We may not always agree, right? I may think the sky is green and you're going to consistently tell me the sky is blue, right? It's evident. But that's just my opinion. And guess what? You may say, hey, I don't agree with you, but at least I listened to you. And that's the thought around this, right? It's the perspective, it's the ability to have the conversation. And with that, where does the conversation start? How many of you really feel that we need to be talking about racial justice in school more often? Just throw your hand up. You don't have to do an electronic hand. Just throw your hand up and wave it at me real quick. Yep. If you really feel like, racial justice should be talked about in schools. And for us, that's what we want to do. I know you guys are doing it, and you're doing it today. And that's what we have to do even more of. How do we have those conversations, though, is one thing that I think is extremely important, right? Are we really teaching young people the ability to have those conversations and respect each other? So, you know, what do you want to see in schools? So if we talk about racial justice, if we have these conversations, what do you want those conversations to look like? What do you want to see in schools around the topic of racial justice? Maybe it's a policy that you want to see fixed. Maybe it's some things you notice. I mean, anyone could jump in at this point. You know, what do you really want to see in some schools? Any of our panelists want to lead us off?
Well, I think the big thing is if someone like me talks about to people about racial justice, they're going to be like, well, how do you know? You're a white girl. You don't know anything about racial justice. Or if you're a black person and you talk to people about that, they're going to be like, well, yeah, of course you feel that way. You're black. They're not going to, what if they don't listen? I think a big thing that you should be wary of when talking to people is, what if they don't listen? What if they keep on doing what they're doing? So I think a good thing to do to talk about to people is having both of them there, having both black and white talk to people, or just someone out of both of the races so that they can listen. They can have a unbiased opinion from both of races and have them ask questions.
Kaya, I think questions, truthful, honest conversation in a respectful manner can get us further than we've ever been, right? And I agree with you. I think that we have this difficulty, and we believe that because you are a certain race or or you have a certain hue of skin, that you have a different ability and perspective. Yes, your perspective is going to be different. Your skill sets is going to be different based off of you being an individual. Not just because of the way you look or the color of your skin. It's just you are Kaya. I'm Akeem. We are different people. That's just who we are, right? But the one thing that we could very well understand, if we are talking about racial justice, we ourselves have to be anti-racist. So the comments of saying you would never understand because you're white in itself, to me, this is Akeem speaking, is racist. Because I want you to understand and I want to fix it, right? And so to fix it, I need to be able to describe it to you, and you need to be able to listen and understand it. And you should be able to describe your experiences to me, and I should be able to listen and hear it. And for me, that is anti-racist. It's the absolute opposite of what racist is. It's the ability to understand each other and speak. I see Ryan Whiteman would like to comment. I want to give Ryan an opportunity.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
So, I don't know if you saw it in the chat, but I said schools, I feel like a lot of schools are reproachful on the subject just because of everything that comes with talking about it and acting on it and stuff like that. And so I feel like it should be talked about a lot more, maybe in a social studies subject, so that way it can correlate with what students are learning in the classroom.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that is exactly the aim of what we're trying to build at Essence Prep. I could speak for that, is how do we create some sense of blended learning, right? You guys are talking about it. You're facing it. It's on social media. It's everywhere. You can't avoid it, right? So the conversation needs to be blended with your content. Real world application. You're going to be facing these challenges, whether they're in the work world or whether they're right there in your classroom. You're going to be having difficult conversations for the rest of your life. Let me guarantee you that. I can't guarantee you anything else, but I can tell you, you will have difficult conversations for the rest of your life, and you need to be able to manage them. And so, I agree with you, Ryan. We have to stop being reproachful. We need to be more proactive. We need to engage students in that because, again, I've learned a long time ago, I don't have the ability to see into the future. I don't think any of us do. But what we can do is build and give ourselves the skills necessary for whatever comes into the future. And we know managing those difficult conversations and respecting one another will have to come in the future for sure, right? So Ryan, thank you. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this name right. Is it Danny? Danie? I want to respect
It's Daniel.
you.
I accidentally
Daniel?
forgot the
Okay, gotcha, Daniel.
I
Go ahead.
how does someone someone that's biased to all this enter a conversation like this?
That's a good point. I think one, it is very difficult. Let's acknowledge that. I can't tell you any other story. It is very difficult to approach a conversation like this when you are biased. I do believe, though, that at the core of most people's heart, what they want to see is what's best for themselves. Let's just be honest, right? And so a lot of time for me, when I am faced with a conversation with someone is very biased, I want to tie it to what and how that approaches them, right? So if this is someone who's just like, look, I just don't like, dealing with this conversation. I don't approach it in the way where I want to have it. I don't believe that people should have equal rights. I begin to ask them about their rights. I begin to ask them about what things that they cherish, and then begin to engage if those were ripped away. Because do believe that whatever right you want to see, you're giving up one for another. I'll explain that. When you want to see something happen for you, whether that's free Cheetos for the rest of our life, because I like hot Cheetos, I don't know anybody else, it's the worst thing in the world, but I love them. But if I wanted free hot Cheetos, right, there's somebody in this world, or someone on this call for that matter, who hates hot Cheetos, who doesn't want to see hot Cheetos be given out, or doesn't think it's a priority. It doesn't matter, right? So I'm giving something or taking away something from someone so that I can have a sense of freedom. That's what this country is about. We have to all learn how to give and take. And so, with that biased conversation or that biased person, Daniel, I think the most appropriate thing is just reminding them of what they cherish so much and what that would look like if that was ever infringed upon or taken away.
Thank you.
Of course, and thank you for the question. Tulip asked, how are morals taught? Because racism is poor moral character. Are morals taught at home, at school, or both? I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to one of our panelists. Does anyone want to jump in before I do a little cold call?
I'm fine with jumping in.
Okay, great.
All right. So I feel like it's not necessarily, I guess it is, but you are taught this at home and at school. It's really your environment. It's based off the people you live with. It's based off of the people you hang out with. It's based off the people you interact with every day. And as you grow and you mature, you start to learn and you kind of take that bias from who you grew up with. So say I grew up with a racist father and my mother is racist. I'm in turn more times I'm going to become racist myself. But as you mature, you grow, you have the opportunity to kind of change your biased view. And that's why programs like this are important, because when you're taught from a young age how you're supposed to act, what is right, what is wrong, what is okay, what's not okay, you just do it on your own. It's involuntary. You just do it by yourself. So I feel like it's taught just by your environment in general.
I couldn't agree with you more. Any other panelists want to jump in before I just jump in about that?
I would like to add on
Yeah.
to that. I feel like, can you hear me well, or do I need to turn on my camera?
Yeah, maybe turn off your camera. It's a little spotty, Lexi.
Okay. I hope this sounds better.
Yes.
But I hope, I believe that it's not only taught at home and at school, but you can teach yourself how you want to live, because now a lot of us are very influenced by social media, and we know, or at least we think we know what's right for us. So not always do you have to agree with your parents or your teachers or your classmates, because we have that self-control that we can decide what we want to listen to, because nowadays we are influenced everywhere, social media, or when we go out, or by other family members that you don't necessarily live with, or by teachers that you aren't taught by now. What I mean is, you can be influenced from everywhere nowadays. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense.
No, that you make perfect sense. First of all, you make perfect sense, and thank you so much for adding to the conversation. I was wondering where you were. I was like, I heard from everyone, but I haven't heard from Lisa. So thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to add to that. I think it's all about exposure and perspective, right? So one, I use it as, if you haven't had chocolate ice cream before, you probably will look at it and say, what is that, right? Until you taste it and you're like, I love chocolate ice cream, or I love vanilla ice cream, whatever it is, right? For a long time, I thought sushi was just disgusting. I had sushi one summer, and now I'm like the biggest sushi fan in the world. So where I'm going with this, and not to belittle our conversation or to take it to food, but I'm comparing it in the sense of, it is about exposure. It is about perspective. It's about what you are actually sharing. And a lot of times, if you don't have that shared experience, it's difficult, right? It's very difficult. But you can break those barriers. I think, Lisa said it best. You can break those barriers. You have the ability now, unlike most, generations before all of us, who didn't have the ability to go out and actually explore things just by using a cellular device, right? Like, they literally had to travel miles and miles away to even learn something different or see something new. We don't have to do that. And so, that's where my hope is for this generation, is that we have so much technology. We have so much ability to continue to connect and learn and thrive off of experiences of others, that will allow us to grow. Before I move on to our next question, there was a comment that was made by Mariela earlier around proper representation in US history and what makes curriculum, or how our curriculum looks like in schools. That's important, right? Because again, perspective, exposure. If you don't see it, you don't truly believe it, right? Let's just be honest. We have that struggle. We're like, have we seen it before? Is it there? Is it really real? Is it present? Right? And so for us, it's hard. It's the same for our history. It's the same for our curriculum. If you were to tell me that there was a Black president before in America, right? I was just born today, and you told me that there was a Black president in America, and all I've lived was this 4 years of President Trump, I would tell you, you are not telling me the truth. Because I would say, there's no way a country produced or voted for a Black man that behaves this way. So again, perspective, exposure, making sure that people understand and inform. I think a panelist said that earlier. How do we make sure that information is out there? Our next question is, what were to happen if we don't teach our kids about this at a young age, and not to teach them when they're older? So let's talk about when we don't do it right. We don't educate, young people. We're not having the conversations like we're having today. What will it look like? Who wants to jump in?
I'm fine jumping in. Oh,
go ahead, Alex, and then Kaya.
Okay. I feel like not teaching them until they get older can kind of be too much, too overwhelming. Like we said before, there's two types of things that can happen. Either they're born into a either way it's going to be biased, but super biased on being either racist or being non-racist. So not teaching them will do more harm than teaching them. Than teaching them, because as long as they're informed, they're able to make their own assumptions, do their own research, see things in their own eyes. And not informing them can allow outside influences to kind of dictate what side they lean more on. But as we live in America, learning and helping everyone become more equal is becoming more and more important as we progress. Sorry about that. As we progress, so I feel like teaching kids at a young age, like we're doing now, would be probably the best thing as we can do with the new generations as they slowly come out. So that's how I feel about the topic.
I agree with you, and it seems like your dog agrees with you as well. I mean, that's just the thought of it. It's like, it's simple, right? It's simple. It's very simple, and you're so right, Alex. I just, for us, it's who's going to do it. Who's going to do it, right? I ask folks this question. I've been privileged to speak on several panels. I've been privileged to speak to several groups and conversations. I was the president of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the chapter in South Carolina, the whole state, right? As a young man, because I was so upset and so frustrated with the fact that I was going to school in South Carolina, and the state constitution in South Carolina said that students only had the right to a minimum but adequate education. I'm gonna pause because I just want you to know that those two words don't go together. Minimum and adequate don't go together, right? And so for a lot of people, people said, Akeem, why is that a priority to you? It's just words on a page. That meant a lot to me. That also told the state of South Carolina how to treat me, right? I was to only be treated minimally, but adequately, right? And my education was only to be valued that way. And for me, it was a problem because that was in the state constitution. It didn't say Black children were only to be treated or teached minimally but adequate. It didn't say white children. It said all children in the state of South Carolina. So for me, that was a problem for everyone, all of us. We needed to change that. So Alex, you're right. Who pushes that lever? Who makes that challenge? And that's my question to you all. Who is going to ask that question? Who's going to push that level? Who's going to be a leader in that? Who's going to do that? Come on now. I know some of you are ready to do it. And it's tough because we don't know what that may look like. It doesn't mean we need to do what Joe Biden's doing today and become president. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to run for any particular office. It doesn't mean that we need to, become a lawyer at times. People think that, oh, well, I just need to go to law school. It could very well mean leading conversations like this in our community. And so, for me, I want to encourage you all to go back into your families and your friends and say, hey, look, today in our youth rally, we talked about this. And with that said, I'm going to turn a question over to Kaya and say, look, Kaya, when you go home and you have that conversation, what are some of the things you think you're going to say?
Well, I would love to be able to say, hey, I actually got answered questions about things I never knew I'd be asked, Usually people don't think that people would talk to me like this because I'm 15. I don't know what I'm talking about. And if I tell my mother about this, she'll probably be a little surprised because I've been a little sheltered, but everyone has at some point. I would love to tell that to people. I would love to be able to say, hey, a Black person heard my voice about racial justice. That's
And
huge. That's
Kaya,
huge.
may I jump in real quick?
Of course.
So I have to not disagree with you, but the way my mother taught me, it was people are people, I mean, it's sad what's happening in the world today on the internet, outside on the streets and stuff like that. But as long as you're respectful to someone, then it doesn't matter. Like it could be someone Black, it could be someone white, it could be someone who's Hispanic or any other race that's in the world. If you're still respectful, you're being nice to a fellow human being. It's not gonna make a difference.
No, that's it. It's what everyone's saying in the chat. It's respectful. Kaya, you said it earlier. It's listening. It's understanding. I think we're all agreeing with each other. I think it's important to acknowledge that people are people. It's important to acknowledge, what Haley said in the chat, that we don't need to be famous to have a voice in this world, right? We just need to have that voice. Share it. Share your thoughts and perspectives. Gabby, when you go home today, what is your conversation going to be like? What are you going to share? And you can actually say when you go home, like Kaya's probably at home now, but when you go home today.
So I think it'll look like me sharing with my parents, of course, that I was able to have an open conversation with people today and feel comfortable talking about it, because I know when we were going over the questions with Ms. Russell, most of the panelists were saying, hey, like, I don't know if I can do this because I don't feel comfortable, because I feel like I don't know enough about this topic to form my opinion yet. But I think I can go home and tell my parents, hey, I feel comfortable talking about this subject, and I'm happy that my school has exposed me more to this topic to where I can make my educated opinion on this. Sorry, I keep saying topic, but on this topic. So I think it'll be a good conversation about exposure and how us kids at this young age are being educated about this.
No, I love it. I love it. I think, you know, for us, it's important for every last one of us to continue to break those walls down and continue to have those conversations. And when we do that, we generally make others feel comfortable and they want to do it too, right? I've noticed that when I just call it out and say, hey, you know, I think that this is a point where we need to have a conversation. And I have it, most people are respectful and most people are willing to have it. Now that you're going to come against those who are just against anything and everything. You know, when I used to work for city government, and we had this phrase that we called folks cavers, and it was a citizens virtually against, or citizens against citizens against virtually everything, right? But that was just our mindset, where we thought people were absolutely against progression, right? We just said, hey, you don't want to move forward, you know, you're just against everything, right? For those folks, though, we did realize, like I shared earlier, they are for something. Someone is always for something, right? There's something they truly, truly believe in. And I think that for us to be better people, it's important for us to ask ourselves, do we want to know that? Do we want to know what that one thing that person cherishes, right? So for instance, if me and Miss Russell were battling and we were trying to get over a challenge or whatever it was, the thing I do know about her is that she deeply cares about children. She cares about the future of San Antonio. And so for me, I want to be able to rest in and ask her, what can we do together to work on that thought, the future of San Antonio and the caring compassion that she has for children? And I can guarantee you almost 80%, close to 90% of the time, right? Because it's still that 20 or 10%, that individual on the other end is willing to return that favor and share that love and that peace with you, resonating with what they care about most. And so it just takes that. We have to learn each other's interest, right? We say that to our parents. Do you know what I care about? Do you know my hobbies? Do you know, right? It's the same exact mindset when we're dealing with other individuals. Ms. Russell, did you want to jump in?
I did want to say, we have a lot of you guys on here, and I think Gabby mentioned that we were practicing as a panel, and one of the things that came up from all of the panelists was that we don't discuss this enough in our schools. And so we know this is something that we need to work on. So we would love to hear from you, maybe not today in the panel, because I don't want to take away from this really powerful conversation, but if you have concrete ideas about ways that we can support more of these conversations, because I think one of the things, I think it was also Gabby, but it might have been Alex who said, you know, once you make this a comfortable space, a safe space, or maybe it's you, Kaya, that and you realize it's okay to talk about these issues that sometimes we have a lot of fear about, or we think we're going to say the wrong thing. Once we start talking, it becomes easier and easier to have these conversations, and some of these walls come down. And as long as we, like Akeem said, as long as we, or Mr. Brown, as long as we all know that we care about each other, that we want the same kinds of things, and we're trying to get to a place where we're in agreement, then we can give each other a little bit of grace. So maybe we use the wrong words, or we don't know exactly how to talk about something, but we all care about each other. And so I love to see this dialogue, and I love to see you all being brave and taking risks and talking about things that maybe are a little bit uncomfortable in our society. So thank you for that.
you primed that so perfectly because, you know, Grace had a question that we didn't get to earlier, and I apologize, but Grace told me that she conducted a Speak Out, Speak Out project over racial judgments and bias for the community, and specifically around police officers and how to fix it. And the question is, from your perspective, your experience, how do you feel about defund the police and other movements around racial justice? I'll tell you that I firmly am in support. I want to hear from every other panelist. I am in support of one being, you know, racial justice. I am in support of reallocating funding that has been given to police organizations around this country for quite some time, where there's absolutely no justification for the amounts of funding that they receive. Again, I've worked for city government. I've worked for the city government of New York, and I've worked for the city government of San Antonio. And I've looked at those police budgets. I've looked at general budgets for the entire city and seen line items after line items. And I can tell you there are large disparities. I am also a son of a retired 32-year serving police officer in New York City. My mom was a police officer, retired as a captain. And I would hear the stories of her as a Black woman struggling with the fact that, you know, there were quotas on arresting children who happen to be Black and brown. There were programs called Dollars for Collars. Those are programs that exist. How, you know, you would get overtime if you would arrest a certain person at a certain time of the day. This is what I'm talking about, right? So this is what keeps the system going. And if we don't challenge it and speak up or speak out against it, it will continue to exist. So that's my thought. I'm in support of it. I think that there are ways that we need to talk about it. What does that look like once we reallocate that money, right? Once we take the money away from the police departments, if that is the scenario, where does that money go? I have some visions and ideas, and I'm sure some of you do. But that's the thing. How do we continue that conversation? So one, Grace, thanks for asking. And I want to give the opportunity to any student, any panelist, anybody who wants to jump in around your thoughts around defund the police and the racial justice movement that's happening.
Kaya, you can go ahead and go real quick.
Thanks, Rihanna. I think that while supporting the racial justice stuff and supporting all of that, the entire Black community has been trying for people to hear their voice for a really, really long time, and we are just barely including more than just the Black community. It's gonna take a while for people to hear both of our voices and all of our opinions, and for them to hear what we have to say, while also trying to fix how racial justice should be heard.
Yeah, I agree with Akeem. I feel like it's not being addressed. The issue, the racial police issue, is not being addressed as much as it should in the country. Not just in San Antonio or Texas, but everywhere in the country. It's not being addressed properly. And I think I am in support of defunding some of the police, because they're not trying to defend their actions. They're not saying anything about it. Not much is being done. And they're there to serve and protect us. But if we keep having these unfortunate incidents and stuff like that that's happening, something needs to happen. They need to be held accountable for what they're doing to people, or what their officers are doing to people.
So thank you guys so much. And I did want to just acknowledge the Speak Out presentation, because we had those yesterday. They were amazing. And we did have one on this topic, and it was our only one from Cast Lead, and they did an incredible job. And what struck me about that presentation, Grace, was how much empathy y'all had for both sides, which is such a huge challenge in our country, right? Akeem shared with you that he had a mother who's a police officer, and yet he really struggles with something. And so trying to walk that middle ground of understanding is such an enormous challenge for all of us. I want to thank Akeem Brown for joining us today. We really, really appreciate you moderating this panel and sharing so much of yourself and your story. I want to thank our panelists, all members of our student advisory who not only participated today, but also said they wanted to talk about this topic, so really elevated it for our community. I want to thank all the students who joined or spoke or asked questions. I want to acknowledge that while we were doing this, we just, somebody put in the chat, we now have a new president, so big national event happening as we speak. So I want to acknowledge it's a big day for our community and a big day for our country. And just take a moment to let that sink in. And what have I left off? I know I made a statement, y'all, about us wanting to hear from you. I am genuine and sincere about that. I'm going to drop my email into the chat. If people have specific things you'd like to see in terms of curriculum, representation, specific subjects where you think this topic should be addressed, I think I saw Zach Wilson on the Mr. Zach on here earlier, and he teaches a class at ALA called Black Studies and another one called Mexican American Studies. And we hope to do more of that at all of our campuses. But we welcome your suggestions, not just having classes, but how do we really have these conversations in all spaces? So we welcome your feedback on how we can be better at making sure you guys can really grapple with this issue that is so important right now and always in our country. So I'm going to put my email into the chat if anybody wants it. I believe we also have a sign-in sheet. If anybody needs to sign in for your school, maybe Eddie can drop that into the chat so that we have a record of your attendance. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Akeem, Mr. Brown. Really appreciate you very much as a partner and a leader in our community.
Thank you guys. I look forward to coming back soon. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.